Greetings. My name is Josh Golden, Director of Music Ministries at Hicks United Methodist Church. I'm so glad you've joined me for just a few moments here in our Wonder of God Wednesday series. You know, as we read through the Bible, right now we're in the book of John. It's my favorite gospel, mainly because it's so poetic. I love the way that John writes when he tells these stories. There's so much action and drama and poetry in all of his words. We're in the middle of the book, which is a little weird in this season because we're about to enter into Christmas and Advent, but we're actually reading through the Bible about Jesus' death and the prediction of his death. You know, have you ever felt far from God? Have you ever felt like you just wanted to scream to the sky, God, where are you? I don't feel you. Well, I know I have, and I think you probably have too. I think we all have. So that's why sometimes it's hard to read these chapters of John, because it talks about Jesus tells his disciples about being in him, about the Father being a part of him and them being a part of him, and that through that the Father. He talks about the coming of the Holy Spirit once he is gone and the Holy Spirit living within inside them. He talks about the fact that he is the true vine and that we can all be branches that bear fruit of that vine. It's a little hard to read when you don't feel super close to God. At the beginning of this pandemic, just about 2 years ago, I felt very far from God. Part of that was just selfishness. Lots of things that I was doing were canceled. It probably is true for you too. And I wondered where God was in my own life every day. But then if you read a little more closely, there are a couple times in these 3 chapters, 13 through 15, there are a couple of times where Jesus defines what it is to be a part of him. He gives a commandment. And that commandment, we all know, it's very simple, to love one another. And later in chapter 15, he says to love one another as he has loved us. And then there's that verse. This verse gets used in a lot of ways, but it very simply says that the greatest is to lay down one's life for a friend. That is what love is. You see, I think Jesus is showing us that even in those times where we don't feel super close to him, where we don't know where he is, if we keep on loving, if we keep on doing that work. You see, when Christ defines love, and he defines it as an action, laying one's life down for a friend, there's 2 things there, right? The first is that it's self-sacrificial. It puts the other in front of us. And the second is that it isn't just a feeling, it isn't an emotion, it isn't controlled by any of those things. It's an action. It's the act of doing something. And I think that when we continue on in that way, when we continue on loving one another, putting others before us, reaching out into the community, loving our friends, our family, our neighbors with everything we have, that feeling, that presence of God, that closeness that maybe we don't feel all the time, it comes back. It returns to us. Because we're following in the way of Christ. We are known by our love. That's how we are known as Christians. And so when we follow that way, when we continue to love outrageously and outlandishly in our actions, the presence of God falls on us again and again. We may not feel it every day. We may not feel it every moment. But I promise you that if you continue in that way, when it comes back even stronger. It comes back even closer and even more embedded into our lives. So when you don't feel super close to God, maybe that's this week. Maybe that's right now. I encourage you, carry forward in love. Love your family, love your friends, love your neighbors with action, even more than you did when you felt God's presence close. Because that is what defines us as Christians, and it's what defines God's presence within us. I hope you have a blessed and great week.